In this video, we are going to talk about DNS settings in the Datapower. Many of my viewers have asked me questions like you are creating videos on Datapower development topic, but there are very few videos on Datapower administration topic. So this video is dedicated to those who have asked that question. So today we are going to touch base upon the topic of DNS setting in the Datapower, and right now what you are looking at is a Datapower interface, and I'm in the default domain. As you know, most of the administrative task needs to be done in the default domain, so I'm in default domain. Before I go ahead and talk about DNS settings here, you need to be aware of that DNS settings are something that you can change and then you cannot change in certain Datapower appliances. For example, if you are dealing with the Datapower physical appliance or Datapower virtual appliance running on ESXi server, DNS setting is something that you can go ahead and make a change. However, if you are dealing with any other Datapower appliances, especially containerized one, then you will not be able to make any change in the DNS. Why? Because this is the way the containerization is built, and this is the way the Datapower application has been containerized. So those settings are locked. What you are looking at right now is a Datapower container appliance interface, and despite the fact that I will not be able to make any change here, it is important that we understand the DNS settings. The options remain the same all across different Datapower appliances, just that in some cases you will be able to edit them or you will not be able to edit them. So without further delay, let's go to the network menu. Under the interface, I have DNS settings, and you can see this is the DNS setting interface. So let's understand what they are. DNS, perhaps you already know, is the way your Datapower resolves name to an IP address, and the settings that we do here are responsible for that. Remember that Datapower is not a DNS server, hence it needs help of external DNS server in order to resolve name to the IP address, and that's precisely the setting that we do over here. So here the important things to know are the search domains. Why do we keep a search domain, and what exactly we want to put here? So here, for example, your organization name is say abc.com, right? So in your organization, the computers would be named like x1.abc.com or x2.abc.com or x3.abc.com, right? So users who are using these names, they would typically just write x1, and they would expect that the DNS would resolve the name. But the question is that how the DNS would resolve the name, because if you just write x1, DNS needs the full name, x1.abc.com, right? So these settings here, if I put here abc.com and if I click on apply, this means that anybody who uses the short name x1 can continue to use the name. If Datapower sees that name x1, it will automatically append .abc.com at the end, and then will send the request to the DNS. That's how this search domains, that's how this option is configured. You can add more than one over here. This means that if x1.abc.com name resolution doesn't happen successfully, then x1 dot something else, maybe abc2.com will be tried, and that's the main goal of this option. So this is search domain. This is DNS server. Now what you are looking at right now is inherited from my local laptop setting, and the add button is disabled for me because this is a DataPower Docker instance. But in physical or in virtual appliances, this will be enabled, and you should be able to add here the DNS addresses. Now from where will you typically get these DNS server address? You need to connect with your networking team in order to get the DNS addresses over here. People typically put at least 2 DNS server over here, because DNS queries are they're queried at a faster rate. As a result, there is a risk of DNS server getting overloaded. So you typically put more than one DNS server over here in order to ensure that you do not overwhelm one particular server. So that is the DNS server address. Now a static host. Static hosts are typically configured in scenarios where you do not want DataPower to connect with the DNS server, rather resolve the IP address locally. So let me try to illustrate it with an example. So let us assume that in the DNS server you have say an entry defined like y1.abc.com, and this is mapped to maybe some IP address like 11.11.11.11. For simplicity, let's pick this IP address. Now you have a use case where you want to assign a different IP address to it. For example, maybe you can say that y1.abc.com needs to resolve an IP address 12.12.12.12. Okay. Now, if you leave it like this, and if you type in like y1.abc.com, by default your DataPower is going to go to DNS server, and DNS server would return its IP address 1111. Good. But you don't want it. In your scenario, you want this to be resolved, this IP address. How would you achieve that? You need to tell DataPower that in this case, don't go to DNS server. Resolve this IP address locally. But how? How DataPower will do this? Static hosts are for this purpose. So here you're going to make an entry, click on add button, you're going to make an entry. In the host name piece, you're going to put y1.abc.com. In the IP address, you're going to put this 12.12.12.12, and that's it. This entry, once you make it in the static host table, it will override the DNS server, meaning that anybody who uses y1.abc.com, they will see the IP address 12.12 rather than 11.11. It might be useful in certain scenarios. One which I can think of it right now is that some entries are missing in DNS server, and you do not have time to go to DNS server administrator and ask them to make an entry over there. Usually this type of request takes some time in an IT environment. So you want to get started quickly. And in that case, you can make an entry in the static host table, and you can continue to use the name. It will resolve the IP address that you have defined under the static host table. So that is what it is. Load balancing algorithm is primarily for a DNS server. I told you typically people keep more than one DNS server, and DNS queries, when they are made, DataPower uses some kind of load balancing algorithm to connect with them. So that is the load balancing algorithms here. Attempts and timeouts are usual settings, self-explanatory. So this is in total what is present under the DNS setting of the DataPower. Here you have couple of links. You know that how DNS typically works. Once a DNS query is made, the result is typically temporarily locally cached. If you want to flush this, Perhaps flush DNS cache is your friend here. You can click on this button and it will flush the locally cached DNS. So that is what the DNS settings are. Once again, key thing to remember here is that you cannot change the DNS settings for DataPower Docker appliances. Although you can see I have added search domain over here, but apply button is still disabled for me. So though some settings might look like you can change it, but you will not be able to ultimately change it. So this is all about the DNS settings in the DataPower. Thanks for watching.